Billionaire slaps black janitor, but when he realizes she's his daughter, his world collapses. What if a billionaire's brutal mistake forces him to face his past, and the woman he humiliated turns out to be his daughter? Marcus Greer strode through the 47th floor of his flagship building, his polished shoes clicking against the marble like a metronome. At 55, he was a man who commanded rooms without speaking. His tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, and silver cufflinks screamed power, but it was his eyes, cold, calculating and unyielding, that made people shrink. He'd built Greer Enterprises from a single real estate deal into a global conglomerate, and he didn't tolerate imperfection. Not in his business, not in his life. Today though, his empire felt like it was fraying at the edges. The maintenance reports were abysmal: leaky faucets, flickering lights, and now, a restroom on the executive floor that was out of order for the third time this month. Marcus didn't care about the details, he cared about results. And results were failing him. "Get me the facilities manager. Now," he barked into his phone, his voice low but sharp enough to make his assistant on the other end flinch. He didn't wait for a response, shoving open the door to the men's restroom to inspect the issue himself. The faint smell of cleaning chemicals hit him, and he froze. Inside, Ayanna Carter was scrubbing the tiles, her knees pressed against the cold floor. Her dark curls were pulled back under a faded blue headscarf, and her janitor's uniform hung loosely on her slim frame. At 28, Ayanna moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been working too long to care about the ache in her back. She hummed softly, a habit that kept her grounded through the monotony of her 12-hour shifts. She didn't notice Marcus until he spoke. "You," he snapped, his voice slicing through her melody. "Why is this restroom still a mess?" Ayanna's head jerked up, her brown eyes meeting his. She stood slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm cleaning it now, sir. It'll be done soon." "Soon isn't good enough," Marcus said, stepping closer. His height and presence filled the small space, making it feel like the walls were closing in. "This is the executive floor. Do you have any idea how much money passes through these halls? And you're wasting my time with your incompetence." Ayanna's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm doing my job, sir. If there's a problem, I can call my supervisor." "Your supervisor?" Marcus laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "I own this building. I don't need your supervisor. I need this fixed. Now." The air grew thick with tension. Ayanna's hands clenched around the handle of her mop. She'd dealt with entitled executives before, but something about Marcus's tone, his utter dismissal of her existence, lit a spark of defiance. "I'm working as fast as I can," she said, her voice firm. "Maybe if you gave us more staff, we wouldn't be behind." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Ayanna said, her heart pounding. She knew she was crossing a line, but the words spilled out. "We're understaffed, underpaid, and expected to keep this place perfect for people who don't even see us." "I'm doing my best." "Your best." Marcus stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "Your best is an embarrassment. You're lucky to have this job." The words hit like a slap, but Ayanna didn't flinch. "Lucky," she said, her voice rising. "I work 2 jobs to pay for my mom's meds and my classes. I'm not here for your gratitude, but I don't deserve your disrespect." The restroom door swung open, and a group of employees froze in the doorway, their eyes darting between the billionaire and the janitor. Marcus's face flushed with rage. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like her. Without thinking, his hand shot out, striking Ayanna across the face. The sound echoed, sharp and brutal. Gasps filled the room. Ayanna stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek. Pain seared through her, but it was the humiliation that burned deeper. The employees stood frozen, too shocked to move. Marcus's chest heaved, his hand still raised, as if he couldn't believe what he'd done. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're fired." Ayanna's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She straightened, grabbed her cleaning cart, and walked out, her head held high despite the sting on her cheek. The crowd parted for her, their whispers trailing in her wake. Marcus stood alone, his heart racing. He'd lost control, something he never did. But as he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the image of Ayana's eyes, burning with a fire he hadn't expected. For the first time in years, a flicker of doubt crept into his mind. Ayana sat in her cramped apartment, the hum of the city filtering through the thin walls. Her cheeks still throbbed, but the real pain was in her chest, anger, shame, and a deep, gnawing fear. She'd lost her job, and with it, the fragile balance of her life. Her mother, Diane, lay in the next room, her breathing uneven from the COPD that had stolen her strength. Ayana's scholarship only covered half her tuition, and without the janitor job, she didn't know how she'd keep up. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello," she answered, her voice wary. "Ms. Carter? This is Evelyn Harper, attorney at Harper & Associates. I need to meet with you. It's urgent." Ayana frowned. "I don't have money for a lawyer." "This isn't about money," Evelyn said. "It's about your family. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" The call left Ayana unsettled. She'd taken a DNA test a year ago, prompted by an anonymous letter urging her to discover her roots. She'd thought it was a scam, but the kit was free, so she'd sent it in. The results had been vague, showing distant relatives but nothing concrete. Now, a lawyer was involved. What was going on? The next morning, Ayana sat in Evelyn's sleek office, her worn sneakers a stark contrast to the polished wood floors. Evelyn, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, slid a folder across the desk. "Ms. Carter, I represent a client who recently uncovered information about you. A DNA test you took last year has been cross-referenced with another individual's results. The findings are significant." Ayana's stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" Evelyn opened the folder, revealing a document with a DNA analysis. "The test confirms that you are the biological daughter of Marcus Greer." The room spun. Ayana gripped the armrests of her chair, her mind racing. Marcus Greer? The man who... She couldn't finish the sentence. The man who slapped her. The man who fired her. Her father. Evelyn's voice softened. "I know this is a lot to process. Marcus had a brief relationship with your mother, Diane Carter, 29 years ago. He was unaware of the pregnancy. The DNA test is irrefutable." Ayana's hands trembled. She'd grown up with her mother's silence about her father, only hearing vague stories of a complicated man who'd left before she was born. Diane had raised her alone, working double shifts as a nurse until her illness took over. Ayana had never imagined her father was a billionaire, let alone the man who'd humiliated her in front of a crowd. "How did this come up now?" Ayana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn hesitated. An anonymous source provided Marcus's DNA to the testing company. "They contacted my client, who hired me to investigate. I don't know who the source is, but they clearly wanted this truth to come out." Ayana's mind flashed to the slap, to Marcus's cold eyes. Her father. The word felt foreign, like a blade she didn't know how to wield. She left the office in a daze, the folder clutched to her chest. Marcus sat in his penthouse office, the city skyline sprawling before him. The news had hit like a tidal wave. The slap had gone viral, captured by a bystander's phone and plastered across social media. #Billionaire slaps janitor trended on X, and the headlines were merciless. Greer Enterprises CEO assaults employee, Marcus Greer's fall from grace. His PR team was scrambling, but the damage was done. Investors were pulling back, and the board was demanding answers. But none of that compared to the bombshell Evelyn Harper had dropped an hour ago. Ayana Carter, the janitor he'd struck, was his daughter. Marcus's hands shook as he stared at the DNA results. He'd had a fling with Diane Carter decades ago, a fleeting moment during a reckless phase. He'd never known she was pregnant. Now, the past was clawing its way into his present, and he couldn't control it. Marcus wasn't a man who felt guilt often, but it gnawed at him now. He saw Ayana's face in his mind, her defiance, her strength. She wasn't just a janitor, she was his blood. And he'd hit her. The thought made his stomach churn. He called Evelyn. I want to meet her. Set it up. She's not ready, Evelyn replied. She's processing. And frankly, Marcus, after what you did, you're lucky she hasn't pressed charges. Marcus's jaw clenched. I'll make it right. Whatever it takes. Ayana agreed to meet Marcus a week later, but only on her terms, a neutral coffee shop downtown, no cameras, no lawyers. She arrived early, her nerves frayed but her resolve firm. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, her headscarf replaced by loose curls. She wasn't here as a janitor or a victim. She was here as herself. Marcus walked in, his usual swagger subdued. He looked older, the lines on his face deeper. He sat across from her, his hands folded tightly. Ayana, he started, his voice softer than she'd ever heard. I didn't know. Ayana's eyes burned, but she kept her composure. You didn't know I was your daughter, but you knew I was a person. And you still hit me. Marcus flinched. I lost control. I've never. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't erase it, she said, her voice steady but sharp. You humiliated me. You fired me. And now I'm supposed to believe you care because of some DNA test. I do care, Marcus said, leaning forward. I know I've messed up. I want to fix this. You're my daughter. Your daughter. Ayana laughed bitterly. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment with a mom who worked herself sick to keep me fed. Where were you? Living in your penthouse, building your empire? You don't get to claim me now. Marcus's face fell, but he didn't argue. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Tell me what you need, he said. Money, a job, anything. Ayana's eyes flashed. I don't want your money. I want you to understand what you did. Not just to me, but to everyone like me. You walk through life like we're invisible. You don't even see the people who keep your world running. Her words cut deeper than Marcus expected. He'd spent his life building walls, between himself and his past, his employees, his own humanity. Now, those walls were crumbling. Over the next few weeks, Ayana and Marcus met again, each encounter fraught with tension but laced with a growing understanding. Ayana shared stories of her childhood, her mother's sacrifices, and her dream of becoming a social worker. Marcus listened, something he hadn't done in years. He saw her intelligence, her compassion, and her resilience, qualities he'd never valued in his own life. Ayana, meanwhile, saw glimpses of a man beneath the billionaire's armor. Marcus told her about his own upbringing, raised by a single father who'd pushed him to be ruthless. He admitted he'd buried his past, including Diane, because it didn't fit the image he'd created. Ayana didn't forgive him, not yet, but she began to see him as human. The public fallout continued. Protests erupted outside Greer Enterprises, demanding Marcus's resignation. Ayana, still reeling from the revelation, found herself at the center of a media storm. Reporters hounded her, but she refused to speak. Instead, she enrolled in a community organizing course, channeling her anger into action. One night, Marcus showed up at her apartment unannounced. Diane answered the door, her frail frame leaning on a cane. You've got some nerve, she said, her voice weak but fierce. I know, Marcus said, his eyes meeting hers. I owe you an apology, Diane. For everything. Diane studied him, then stepped aside. She's in her room. Don't make this worse. Marcus found Ayana at her desk, surrounded by textbooks. I'm stepping down as CEO, he said without preamble. The board's been pushing for it, and they're right. I've lost sight of what matters. Ayana looked up, surprised. You're giving up your empire? No, Marcus said. I'm trying to build something better. Starting with us. The turning point came when Ayana organized a community forum to address workplace conditions at Greer Enterprises. She invited employees, activists, and media, expecting resistance from Marcus. Instead, he showed up, not as the CEO, but as a speaker. In front of a packed room, he admitted his failures, not just to Ayanna but to every worker he'd overlooked. "I've spent my life chasing power," he said, his voice raw. "But I failed the people who make this company run. I failed my daughter. I'm here to listen and to change." The room was silent, then erupted in murmurs. Ayanna watched from the front row, her heart conflicted. She wanted to believe him, but trust was hard-won. After the forum, a reporter approached Ayanna. "Ms. Carter, you're Marcus Greer's daughter. What's next for you?" Ayanna took a deep breath. "I'm not defined by him," she said. "I'm Ayanna Carter, and I'm here to fight for people like me, people who've been invisible for too long." Her words went viral, not as a scandal but as a call to action. Donations poured in for her education, and community leaders reached out, offering her a platform. Marcus, meanwhile, began funding initiatives for workplace reform, using his wealth to amplify Ayanna's voice rather than his own. 6 months later, Ayanna stood at her college graduation, her mother in the front row, tears in her eyes. Marcus was there too, at Ayanna's invitation, sitting quietly in the back. He'd kept his promise, stepping down as CEO and focusing on philanthropy. Their relationship wasn't perfect, too much pain lingered for that, but it was growing. They met weekly, not as billionaire and janitor, but as father and daughter, learning each other's worlds. Ayanna took a job at a non-profit, advocating for workers' rights and racial equity. She used her story, not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience. Marcus, humbled by his fall, became her quiet supporter, funding scholarships and community centers in her name. One evening, they sat together in Diane's apartment, sharing a meal. Diane, her health improving with better care, smiled at them. "You two are a mess," she said, "but you're figuring it out." Ayanna laughed, and Marcus joined her, the sound unfamiliar but warm. For the first time, they felt like a family, not perfect, but real. The journey wasn't over. Ayanna's advocacy grew, inspiring others to demand change. Marcus, no longer the untouchable billionaire, found purpose in rebuilding what he'd broken. Together, they forged a bond stronger than DNA, rooted in forgiveness, accountability, and hope. And in the city that had watched their story unfold, a new narrative emerged, one of redemption, resilience, and the power of facing the truth.